Welcome to the second episode of Bucket Questions. I need a theme song. Somebody invent one. Daxton? Anybody? Give me a theme song. Okay, anyway, for the first question, I dug deep into the question bucket, and this question is dated September 9th. And it's in pencil, so you might not be able to see it very well. But it says, where does dust come from? Okay, so here we go. Dust. Dust is all over people's house. Mine probably more than most because we don't really dust a lot. We actually kind of weirdly like the aesthetic. But anyway, dust is made up of a whole bunch of different household things. Much like how in earth science, when we were talking about volcano debris, the volcano can launch rocks and they call it tephra, and then if the rocks are tiny enough, suddenly they call it ash. Well, basically any particle that's small enough in your house gets to be called dust. So dust can be made up of lots of things. Pet hair, people hair, fireplace ash, food crumbs, dirt, etc. Depending on the time of year, dirt might be the most common thing in your dust. My most common thing in my dust at home is probably cat hair. We have some of you guys saw in one of the environmental science videos that we have a rather long-haired cat. Both of our cats kind of shed all over the place. But another component of dust is, in fact, as you might have heard, skin cells. Now, skin cells are not necessarily most of your household dust. It really depends on what else you've got going on that makes all of your dust, but it's probably not as much as most of the rumors that you may have heard about what makes up dust. However, people are shedding their skin constantly. That's just the way our skin is made. We have layers and layers of skin, and the skin cells on top get shed off and are constantly being replaced by other cells. Those skin cells usually end up landing on our floor or in our bed sheets, so wash your sheets frequently. Now, as if it wasn't gross enough that a component of household dust is made up of skin cells, here's another really gross fact. So if you're grossed out easily by buggy things, don't keep listening to this part. Skip to the next question. Anyway, once our skin cells get shed onto our floors and in our beds, then there's a tiny microscopic critter called, here comes the picture for those of you who are squeamish, a dust mite. And dust mites live everywhere in our house, and they eat our dead skin cells. And if you are allergic to dust, fun fact, if you are allergic to dust, you're not actually allergic to dust. What you're allergic to are these guys, the dust mites. And there are two different kinds, and you can actually get tested for both of them. And one of the best ways to deal with your allergies from dust mites is to clean your house and wash your sheets and pillowcases often in hot water. So that's question number one for the day. Where does dust come from? Our next question for the day was in my bucket, but according to the person who wrote this question, it's actually from a second grader. And the question is, why is earwax yellow? I love elementary kids. They have the best questions. They're so curious. And so I'm going to attempt to answer. And so if you happen to know an elementary kid who's always wondered why their earwax is yellow, here you go. Although you might have to, translate it for a second grader. I'm going to put it in high school language, see if you can put it in second grade language. So to understand why earwax is yellow, first of all, we have to remember a couple of things that all my biology students should know about waxes. Okay, let me scroll. There we go. Okay, so wax is in the category of being a lipid. And by being a lipid, many of you guys who have had me in biology class, remember lipid macromolecules, know that that's made up of lots of carbon connected to lots of hydrogen with very few oxygen molecules also joined in there for the connection. And there are lots of other lipids, all oils, all fats, all waxes are in the category of lipids, including things like butter, vegetable oil, and cholesterol. Like many other lipids, earwax also has a scientific name that has an EN ending, and the scientific name of earwax is cerumen. Now, the way the molecule is shaped, for those of you guys who understand such things is that there's this big long chain of carbons that kind of keeps going and going and going and going. And then that one's probably connected to an oxygen, a hydrogen, and all of these other little lines here that I'm not going to finish drawing in are all going to have hydrogens attached to them. So there's going to be an H at the end of each one of these lines. And that's probably more organic chemistry than most of you care to know, so get on with it, Woodman. Okay, so to understand why earwax is yellow, first we have to come back to our visible spectrum of light diagram that we used last bucket question episode. And right now we are interested in the yellows there. So where yellow ends and where red or green begins, well, that was in last week's bucket question. So go back to that for more information. But the point about the visible spectrum that we are trying to understand today is that the light gets reflected off objects and into our eyes. And it's the reflected light that's the important part. The reflected light is going to equal the colors that we see. Colors that we see. Those are the ones that are reflected. So some materials are going to absorb certain wavelengths of the color spectrum, and some materials are going to reflect certain wavelengths of the color spectrum. And it depends on what the object is. So this pen is purple. And so what's happening is that all of these other colors, all these other wavelengths of light are being absorbed into my pen. And it's this range of colors here that are being reflected off of the pen into my eyes and reflects the color that we see. And the same thing goes for any object. Let me see if I can find another color. Here we go. Here we go, folder. Here, this one's green. Green. And so this set of wavelengths is being reflected off of the folder into my eyes, and these sets here on either side of the green spectrum, well, they're being absorbed into the material that makes up that folder, and so that's why we see colors. Colors that we see are the light being reflected off of the object and into our eyes. Okay, so what happens in any object that has a color is that the molecules that make up that object have a particular shape. And that particular shape is going to absorb or suck in some of the wavelengths of light, and it's going to reflect others. And so if this is my object, and light that we see from light bulbs in the sun is really made up of all the colors. So there's my rainbow. Wow, smartboards, aren't they awesome? Okay, so some of the colors might get reflected off, and other of the colors might stay in the object. This is the absorbed. Oh, I guess I already wrote it here. Hold on. Whoops, sorry, pen. Try again. That's absorbed, whereas this arrow represents the light that's reflected. And what my brain then would read this situation as, that would show me that this object I would designate as being red, because the red is absorbing, the red is reflecting into my eyes so that I can see it. So if we come back to our earwax, most of these lipids are in fact in the yellowish region. And for whatever reason, this particular shape and arrangement of carbons and hydrogens, for whatever reason, what that shape molecules do is they reflect light in the yellow range and they absorb all of the other colors of light, and that's why it shows up as yellow. So good luck explaining that one to a second grader. Okay, so I think that we have time for one more question. And this question says, are your fingernails and teeth made out of the same thing? And the answer is, well, kind of. But before we answer the teeth question to go with fingernails, I'm actually going to do another step first, which is that we're going to look at hair. This is a picture of human hair underneath a microscope. And again, if you had biology class with me, you looked at samples of human hair under a microscope, and this is pretty much what it looks like. Now, human hair is not considered living. It's less than 1 cell big. Whoops. Human hair is made up of primarily protein. I don't know why my pen keeps doing that. Anyway, protein, and this protein is called keratin. And that's pretty much what your hair is made out of. You have hair cells in the hair shafts of your skin that sort of secrete, pardon the word, secrete out protein in the form of hair, as we see it on our heads. Now, nails are also mostly protein, and in fact, it is the same protein in hair and nails, and it's, again, keratin protein. That's also the same protein, actually, that makes up rhinoceros horns and things like that. But whereas hair is mostly protein, nails are keratin plus calcium minerals. And so hair and nails, both having keratin, those are in the category of what we call organic molecules, which means that they're carbon-based and that they are related to somehow to living cells. In this case, they are produced by living cells. And if you had a biology class with me, you ought to know how protein is produced through the process of transcription and translation, because the DNA makes protein. Anyway, calcium minerals, these are considered inorganic. They're not carbon-based. And the other best place to find inorganic material in our body, so more or less rock-like material in our body, is in fact in our bones and our teeth. And so our teeth are primarily made up of calcium minerals. And so our teeth and nails made out of the same thing, yes and no, in that they're made of calcium minerals, but nails actually have more in common with hair. I'll label this as hair. Than they do with teeth. Teeth have more in common with bones. Bones are also made of calcium minerals, but they're made of calcium minerals plus living cells. And so bones are living tissue, and therefore they can regrow, whereas teeth are only calcium minerals, and that's why they don't regrow, and that is why you have to brush your teeth and take care of your teeth, because you only have 2 sets, and all y'all already lost your first set, so don't lose your second. So if you get holes in your teeth, they won't regrow. If you get breaks in your bones, they probably will regrow, although you might need to screw them into place and possibly Dugan. Anyway, this has been episode 2 of Bucket Questions, and I'll try to keep doing this as often as I am able. Have a great day and enjoy the answers.